Welcome to this session where we are joined by graduates and recent graduates from the Yale School of the Environment. And they will engage in a lively discussion with the CEO of Volvo Group, Martin Lundstedt, and Professor Paul Anastas, who has just received the prize, the Volvo Prize this year. And Paul Anastas is professor at Yale University at the Department of the Environment. And my name is Katarina Rolfsdotter Jansson. I will be moderating this event. And I'd like to first, of course, introduce the students. Wonderful to see you, all four. And with us here we have Ines Ayostina. She's a Master of Environmental Management candidate, specializing in industrial ecology and green chemistry. And we have with us Victoria Gramuglia, who is a second-year candidate for a master's degree in environmental management from the Yale School of the Environment. And we have Urvi Talaty with us. Wonderful to see you too. She's an environmental innovation fellow at the Yale Center for Business and the Environment and the Tsai Center for Innovative Thinking at Yale. Welcome. And we have also with us Jamie Lee. And Jamie Lee is a 5-year program master of environmental management candidate at the Yale School of the Environment, specializing in business and the environment. Great. So, Martin Lundstedt, I'd like you to start us off with some comments, please.
Thank you, and first and foremost, most welcome to this session. And the whole idea, obviously, is about taking the opportunity to really meet between science, enterprise, because when we listen into the different type of panels at COP26, everyone is talking about, the force when different angles are coming together, right? Political leadership, academia, private sector, but also, of course, the civil society. So the whole idea about this discussion is to take the advantage of that we have Professor Anastas and the whole bunch of fantastic students here together and discuss how can we move the needle and how can we actually utilize what science is bringing to the table and implement that also in our transformation.
Thank you very much, Martin Lundstedt. So now I turn to you. Ines, would you like to start with a question to Martin, please?
Yeah, sure. I will start us off. So Martin, with the increasing complexity of climate problems, there's an increasing concerns of the importance of interdisciplinary approach to overcome climate problems. On that end, how do you envision Volvos would evolve their sustainability team to solve this problem?
Thank you very much, Ines.
Thank you, Ines. And I think this is one of the topics that we are discussing a lot now these days. And we actually had a very good conversation this morning about that topic, because as we see, for example, areas where we are into, logistics and transport, etc., of course we can provide great equipment. But if we don't have the right energy sources, right grid, the right supporting system connected through digitalization, smart route planning, safety systems, the transformation will not happen, right? And then you can say, one thing that is sure today is that you cannot do anything alone anymore. Historically, when we were really providing products, you can provide that product to the market with a go-to-market strategy, but with this solution and system thinking, it's not possible anymore. So from that shape and form, diversity in all aspects will be important, right? Yeah. The sustainability team, the good news about the sustainability team is actually that's the whole company. Because today it's an integrated part of our work. I think that has been a huge change over the last 4, 5, 6 years. And a little bit like the ISO 9000 binder once upon a time, that we were sitting nervous. Okay, it should be an ISO 9000 revision. And that was a little bit the same with sustainability. But today we understand if we are not onto that ball, we will not be winners, right? So that's the reason why we need diversity for real, different backgrounds, disciplines, geographical knowledge, of course, gender, age and everything. So that is a key driver in order to reach that.
Thank you very much, Martin. Let's take a question from Victoria.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. As we know, the corporate sector is responsible for so much of our global emissions. So my question to you here, being at COP26 in Glasgow and looking forward to future COPs, how can we better incorporate the business perspective into the negotiations, into the agreements that are happening here in these forums?
Thank you, Victoria.
Thanks, Victoria. And I think the good news is that we see that more and more, that is already incorporated to another level. Because I think everyone has realized after COP21 that was really decisive. I mean, the Paris Agreement and really to get to an agreement, where do we need to head for the 1.5 degrees, etc. 6 years down the road, I think everyone feels that, you know, someone has to do it. And the private sector must be a very important part of that, because yes, since we are responsible for a lot of the emissions, but maybe you can put it in another way and say we're responsible for a very big part of the activity in society. And with that, emissions are coming if you not play the cards right. So I think that is coming with the fact that prosperity as we knew it, I mean financial development, but also social inclusion. I mean public transport systems has been a fantastic social inclusion. I mean must be considerably more sustainable. But the answer is not to stop doing this. It is to do it in a different way, and it's to think in completely different ways. And that was again the conversation that we had this morning, Paul. Mm-hmm. So we are on to it, and we are very, very motivated also. We discussed it just before this session as well, right? So looking forward to work with you guys.
Well, excellent, thank you. And a question from Urvi, please.
Yeah, thank you. So in the run-up to COP, so many countries and companies have been declaring their net zero goals, and a lot of companies in the carbon removal space have been doing that by investing in early stage carbon removal startups to diversify their carbon portfolios. So I was wondering what your thoughts were about how companies could do that for green chemistry solutions, and what are some potential challenges that might arise with that?
Thank you, Urvi.
Thanks, Urvi. And I mean, obviously, and we will come back to that when it comes to the research fields of Professor Anastas. Happen to coincide also that we are very proud, because that is completely independent, obviously, with the jury's choice. But this is a true area where we really need to move the needle, because not only that the scope 3 downstream emissions, as we talked about, I mean CO2, etc. But one very cool thing that is happening now is that we are actually only 3 weeks ago presented the first fossil-free steel made into a commercial vehicle, right? A mining hauler. But that next step is, of course, plastics in the different shapes and forms. It's a very, very big thing that we're doing. We have been talking a lot about the recycling and how we can do that, but really to make it much more smart. So the whole green chemistry and how you should think about it from the start. And I just learned a very interesting expression that probably you will touch upon later. Design for disassemble. So I mean, you're taking through the full circularity. I think we have reached somewhat there. But to your point also, that's the reason for why we have innovations arenas around the globe that we are calling Camp X by Volvo. That is an open innovation where we have our own researchers and designers, and we are inviting everyone that can make a contribution into transport logistics, a lot of startups, great ideas, where we also can support them with their type of development, go-to-market, in some cases by really cooperating even with an equity stake, right? In some ways, just to support them to take off. So that is a super important ecosystem.
Thank you very much. And let's go to Jamie now.
Thank you very much. And I believe you've already touched in a little bit about what I'm being to ask you today. A lot of the products that you create will have environmental impacts that are determined already at the design stage. How has Volvo Group tackled these challenges of design such that it would integrate circularity principles throughout its entire life cycle? Thank you.
Another great question.
First and foremost, again, I think in many shapes and forms of the materials that we had, if I may say so, better knowledge about, the full circularity. It has been incorporated. And the first step is, of course, what we call the remanufacturing. And we have a big remanufacturing operation. So we are before it's going to the next stage of the life cycle, of course, is utilizing that for upgrading, right? But then obviously for many of the materials, we have had long-lasting, so to speak, programs for really having a true circularity. But in specific areas, and that's the reason why we talked about it, it's not only about, first and foremost, as we discussed, green bioplastics, for example, very important area now to continue to drive this, but also how we are moving away from a transactional type of relation with our suppliers, because we talked about paint actually, but it could be whatever. If we ask our suppliers to provide paint, the business model will be how can we provide as much paint as possible, instead that should be better to define what do we really want to have out from the paint. In my book, that is typically protection and beauty, right? Because a nicely painted truck is beautiful, but it's also the protection, right, for corrosion, etc. And then you can have the incentive of the two parties to get what you want, but at the same time minimize the usage and thereby creating better value from the supplier, etc. So there is also, I think, a big need in this now to utilize much more of the knowledge, again, from science and also from our suppliers and supply chain partners to do this. But big programs ahead, of course, the whole Scope 3, even if that is a minor part than the downstream CO2 emissions, or minor, it's still big, right? 6-7%. It's all about credibility, and it's all about, in the long run, money with price on carbon. There's no flip side of the coin, basically. So we're working, but we need your support. So if you want to work with Volvo, you're more than welcome. We talked about it before.
Well, thank you very much, Martin. Do you have any questions for the students?
No, maybe one question that came to my mind when we started to discuss here is, what are key, in your future career when you're thinking about, for what organization or company would you like to work? What values are important to you for when you would like to choose an organization or company?
Well, yes, please go ahead. Who would like to answer that one? You go, Urvi.
I can start us off. I think for me personally, I think it would be very important that the values of the organization align with my personal values, and I think it's important that when companies are making commitments, there are ways that they can demonstrate how they will actually go through with that, and then there needs to be working with communities that companies impact. I think that's always important.
Thank you. Anybody else like to add?
Yeah, I can answer next. So for me, apart from the values, the most important thing is the companies are walking the talk, walking the values, walking the commitment. Yeah, for me, that is really important.
Thank you. And now, Martin, would you like to introduce the prize winner, Paul Anastas, please?
Absolutely, and that of course is a great honor to have the opportunity to do so. Since 1990, the Volvo Group has been actually having on a yearly basis the Volvo Environment Prize, and we are very happy that that has been installed already in 1988 and handed out the first time 1990. It is a foundation that we are organizing, but the whole setup is basically that it's covering all type of research and frontier research in the whole field of sustainability, basically. In addition to that, the setup is very robust. So we have first and foremost a scientific committee of also well-known researchers that is funneling down, because it's a lot of good proposals. And then finally, it's a prize jury, also by very well distinguished, completely independent from the Volvo Group, obviously, then selecting the laureate. And before then coming to this year's laureate, I'm also proud actually to report back that 4 of our laureates have also received actually the Nobel Prize. And probably more to come, if I put it like that. And as a matter of fact, this year's laureate in physics Syukuro Manabe for climate modeling received the Volvo Environmental Prize 1997. When we talk about it, we say, I mean, of course, it is for us to tell to the scientists that they're doing a fantastic job, but it's also for us to tell others, including ourselves, that we need to listen and to act upon what science is telling us. And I think that is more important than ever these days, where we have a lot of different type of information that is overwhelming us on social media, but also in all these different opportunities that we are really pushing forward for great scientists. So without further ado, Professor Paul Anastas then, and I will make the short motivation statement, and the Volvo Environment Prize Foundation, they have also their own homepage if you are interested to read more about Professor Anastas' research. So, I quote from the jury: adopting benign by design techniques, Professor Paul Anastas is a global pioneer of green chemistry, a systems approach to sustainability that tackles pollution problems at their source. His research is revolutioning the chemical industry from fundamental reaction methods to applications as diverse as processing foods and producing green hydrogen. So it's a great honor to have you here, and we will, a couple of weeks, also celebrate the actual prize together with Professor Anastas.
Thank you so much.
Wonderful. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. First of all, thank you very much, Martin. And I really want to genuinely thank the Volvo Foundation, because as you have just heard, the Volvo Foundation established this prize, the Volvo Prize in Environment, in order to inspire me. That's the way I say it, because they wanted to inspire everyone, but they inspired me. 30 years ago is about the time that I started doing green chemistry. And I looked at the winners of the Volvo Prize as genuine heroes and inspirations. So many, and it is such an honor to be in their company. So thank you very much. But in so many ways, I do consider this prize as recognizing the global community of green chemistry practitioners who are doing research and implementing that research into real positive change for the environment. And they are all over the world, and I salute them. So when thinking about green chemistry, it is about design of our products, processes. We know that everything that we see, touch, and feel is made from chemicals. And we have been magnificent in terms of inventing products that have revolutionized our lives. What we haven't done very well is ensure that those products don't cause harm. And we've seen that. And I would say that we are, as a society, we are excellent at solving problems. And we are terrible at defining what problems to solve. So in other words, we know that CFCs were a wonderful solution to a particular problem, or leaded gasoline was a solution to a problem, but we didn't design the problem statement right. And so what did we wind up with? Unintended consequences. So why is this so important? This is so important because here we are at COP26, the Climate Change Congress. And I can guarantee you that if we focus like a laser on reducing carbon, if we make sure that we set our definition on reducing carbon, that we will succeed, and perhaps tragically. Why? Because systems problems require systems solutions. We know that climate is inextricably linked to energy, energy to water, water to agriculture, agriculture to health. And we can't simply look at one of those and say we're going to try to solve it in isolation. So what we've done is the right things, but we've done them wrong historically. What green chemistry is all about is how you do the right things right. How you ensure that you look at the entire system and do systems design, because without that, we will have unintended consequences. So for 30 years, a global community of green chemists has been involved in designing solutions to make a difference, a positive difference in this world. Why? Because 30 years ago, COPs like this were talking about excuses, that solutions weren't available. And so this community mobilized to generate these solutions in order to take away those excuses. No excuses. No more excuses, because for 30 years, new solutions have been filling the scientific literature and being implemented and are readily available today. No excuses. We need to move forward. Science and technology is holding up its end of the bargain, and it needs to be implemented at scale. The last thing I want to say is about the urgency with which we need to do this. We often hear, when it comes to some of these most pressing problems of climate and other sustainability issues, is how are we going to manage these problems? Certain things are so egregious, so abhorrent, so unacceptable, that you don't manage them, you end them. When Abraham Lincoln saw the abhorrence of slavery, he didn't manage it, he ended it. When we realized the tragedy of child labor, we didn't manage it, we ended it. When we see the abhorrence of what the burning of fossil fuels and all of the cascading consequences of it, we should recognize it as abhorrent and end it. I brought a piece of coal. Now, in my work, I do some work with the UN Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons. You might want to ask yourself, is this a chemical weapon? Chemical weapon is the intentional harm and death of people. Well, you say, well, this isn't intentional. But it's knowingly and willfully harming people and the planet. So maybe it qualifies. When we see evil, we end it. And that's what green chemistry is all about. I cannot thank the Volvo Group, the Volvo Foundation enough for this opportunity to move this forward, and thank you so much.
It's our pleasure. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Paul and Anastas, for this very inspirational speech. I have one question for you before I turn to the students.
Yes.
As a green chemist, expert in green chemistry,
Yes.
The Montreal Protocol from 1987 ended a global threat to humanity. What can we learn from the way we handle this global environmental crisis related to chemistry and what we're seeing now at the climate threat?
I think that's a wonderful question, and one of the most important elements was not merely that countries came together, but there existed a technological solution that, quite frankly, would be profitable for the future. So the solution that existed was in line with the natural incentives and drivers in order to deal with that issue. I will say, just one more moment, that we find that economics are often our decision-making framework. And yet we know that economics has no value system to it. I am not going to outsource, and neither will you, outsource our decision-making to a valueless framework. And so there are only two things that fall outside of our economic framework these days. The sacred and the priceless, and the evil and the abhorrent. Those are the only things that are not subject to economic measures. Is there anything more sacred and priceless than humanity and the biosphere that supports it? And is there anything more evil and abhorrent than ending it?
Thank you again.
Thank you.
Let's now turn to the students. Ines, would you like to start with a question?
Yeah, sure. So Professor Anastas, you mentioned a lot of we before, but there's business leaders and there's us, the academia. So how do you see the connections between business and academia right now, and how do you envision us can close the bridge, and bridge the gap in the future? Sorry.
What a wonderful question, because I see industry, business, and academia like this. Why? Because what academia is doing is trying to answer the questions in 2021. What is possible versus impossible? What is knowable versus unknowable? And the answers to those questions are changing in real time. When we look at big data analytics, it allows us to know things that we never could have from large data trends. When we look at ubiquitous integrated sensors, it allows us to know things and understand things. When we look at artificial intelligence, which may very likely surpass our capacity within just a few years, and we look at synthetic biology, which is creating new life forms, it completely changes what's possible versus impossible, what's knowable versus not knowable. And the way that informs and empowers business in order to not only do things better, but to do better things. Provide function, provide service in ways that are going to be healthful rather than toxic, renewable rather than depleting, and restorative rather than degrading. So those partnerships are what's necessary.
Thank you. Do you have a follow-up question on this one? You're good, okay, all right. So let's move to Victoria.
Congratulations, Professor Anastas. In your research, I'm curious to hear about which industries are really stellar in green chemistry, which are maybe a little bit more lackluster, and for those that are lagging behind, if perhaps there's a lack of green chemistry training, education, formal education, how we might be able to better incorporate green chemistry thinking into those industries.
Thank you, Victoria.
That is a wonderful question. So I have to say that there is green chemistry taking place across every industry sector. I cannot name a sector that it's not taking place in, but it's not being done systematically. So you will see wonderful examples, but having it done systematically is what's so important. And so when we look at which sectors are leading, it's more that well-established, embedded infrastructure-based companies have a tougher time with the transformative innovations, the real leapfrog technological innovations, because they have business models and supply chains which make that more difficult. What we're seeing are some astounding startups that are doing transformative types of technologies. There's a great green chemistry company called P2 Science that I'm lucky to be affiliated with, that is using the products of the farm and the field and the forest in an integrated biorefinery. That is transformative to make specialty chemicals and ingredients. There's a company called Air Company that takes CO2 and converts it into value-added products. These transformative innovations will displace some of the existing companies, and I say some dinosaurs will evolve and some will go extinct. So we'll see how that all plays out.
Thank you. Would you like to comment, Martin, on this question?
No, I think it's exactly, I mean, first and foremost, a conversation that we spent quite some time this morning about thinking, and it was one of the questions also earlier here, how do we actually find ways to utilize the force of specific companies that are specialized also in these type of things and are open for that type of ecosystems. And we have found also that way you're working very inspiring. And to your point, I think the way you're working even more systematic is so important about it, because it has been a little bit like in other transformations, okay, we have to make a pilot here and a pilot there, but this is really a systematic opportunity, and the solutions are to a big extent already, and it's always a moving needle, right, but existing as we speak. So could just agree, of course, to what Professor Anastas said.
Well, and if I could just add, what was so exciting to me about Martin's remarks is that systems thinking, of looking at this as a systems challenge.
And when you refer to the dinosaurs,
yes.
There is, of course, a UNDP campaign with a dinosaur that is walking into the General Assembly of the United Nations. If you've missed this video, it's amazing. Have you seen it? It's the tagline in "Don't choose extinction." So it's a wonderful. It's by the the Nations Development Program.
This is what happens to dinosaurs.
Yes. So basically, the tagline is that we're sponsoring our own meteorites. Yes. So would you like to continue, Urvi?
Yeah, absolutely. Congratulations, Professor Anastas. Green chemistry is such an important field of science, and I think it's absolutely important for any company engaged in manufacturing to be thinking about renewable feedstocks, reducing waste and pollution, and making sure that they aren't causing harm. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what are some interesting and perhaps surprising things that green chemistry solutions in science can teach any company that's wanting to work on their climate impacts.
Thank you very much, Urvi.
Thank you for that question. I have to say that perhaps the biggest surprise that I encounter in working with various companies is that sustainability, addressing climate change, is about innovation and profitability. For so long, it has just been viewed as a sacrifice, that if anybody was going to bring up these topics, you better be ready to hold on to your wallet because you were going to lose money. So the John F. Kennedy liked to say that the great enemy of the truth is very often not the lie, but the myth. And the myth that these things are just going to be a cost strain is being disproven every day by green chemistry solutions. So I think that if there's one big surprise, that's it. There are other fascinating surprises that people are seeing coming out of science and technology. When people see that the product of trees is a substance called lignin. And lignin is 98% of it is burned. Seeing that you can make valuable products from lignin is a surprise to many companies. Seeing that you can convert CO2, what has always thought to have been impossible, into valuable products, that's a surprise. So it's full of surprises, luckily all on the positive side.
Thank you. Would you like to add one, Martin?
No, again, we actually discussed lignin and the opportunities that exist. But again, that is also what makes me very impressed about also your personal journey, is of course this in-depth knowledge about what, in the field of green chemistry from a scientific point of view, but then also the capability of actually discussing together with different parts of the society, not at least business, to make things happen. Right. Because, science is beautiful, as we said, we need to listen to science, but execution is also very important. And that is also what I think now, to have this concrete and tangible example, how we can turn the needle, so to speak. So again, great.
Thank you. Would you like to add a follow-up question, Urvi?
Yeah, sure. So I know that a lot of the conversation today has revolved around collaborating and how it's important to innovate. Since both of you have such a great deal of experience doing that, what are some barriers that you had to cross, and what are next steps for anyone who's interested in creating a global network of people working on the same thing?
Such great questions.
It's a fantastic question.
Would you like to start?
No, I think one of the key aspects, I mean, if you want to really go for a change and drive that change, obviously, we often get the question, what is the biggest barrier, right? And we are often ending up, grid capacity, or, we don't have enough charging stations, whatever. But the reality is that, of course, these are barriers, or price and carbon, whatever. But it starts with yourself and your organization to have the right mindset and to embrace that we are maybe part of the problem, but we are also part of the solution, right? And if you do that, you also open up for cooperations in different shapes and forms. And then suddenly you are detecting and discovering so many opportunities by cooperating with others. I mean, students like yourself that are sitting with the most recent and fresh facts and research. Scientists that have been working for a long period of time, all the different parties in your ecosystem. I mean, I remember I worked a lot with Toyota during the days, and we had an expression in our company at that time saying, okay, we have to eliminate waste. And then one of the Japanese seniors that I really admired, he said, Martin, that is the wrong formulation. He said, you need to see the waste. Because if you see the waste, then you will make the elimination happening. Then you will end it, to your point. And I think that is so important when you have learned that, are you really all in for it? Have you decided that this is something that we want to change? That is the biggest thing. If you do that, a lot of things will follow. That is my view.
I'm in complete agreement that it's about new thinking and thinking differently. Another JFK quote is, a torch has been passed to a new generation. But this generation isn't one of years. It's a generation of new thinking. And how you address the problems, the perspectives that you bring to see what's possible. All of you are Yale students, and you're seeing that this new thinking is taking place in initiatives like the planetary solutions perspective that Yale is doing, and the natural carbon capture center. And this is bringing together not just academics, but of course people with knowledge from business and all sectors of the community. That new thinking, I think, is overcoming any obstacle.
And this is so hopeful to hear, to see these students and listen to your brilliant questions. Absolutely. Jamie, would you like to pose your question?
Wow. How do I top all the questions from my colleagues over here? I believe Professor Anastas, you've already also addressed this, but I was wondering, what are the challenges that startups face in a landscape where it's David versus Goliath in the chemical industry to bring these solutions that you're speaking of to scale? And
I am so glad you asked that question, and I'm so glad you asked it that way, because if we remember the end of the story, David won. David beat Goliath. And so when we see these new startups, these visionary new companies, I take a step back and we look at what's going on right here at this COP. And some of you may have seen that we were visited by our mutual friend Greta. Greta was outside and she was talking about the enough blah, 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 right? Remember that? And she wants answers to her questions and enough blah, blah, blah. So what is blah, blah, blah? Blah, blah, blah is measuring, monitoring, reviewing, assessing, characterizing the problem endlessly. What is the opposite of blah, blah, blah? It is inventing, it is innovating, and it is implementing at scale the next generation of solutions. Those are the answers that Greta deserves. And the answers that Greta deserves include, how do you take CO2 from being an existential threat into converting it into valuable products that can never harm our atmosphere? Well, that's what's happening when we convert it into building materials, road surfaces, etc. How do we split water, seawater, into hydrogen so that we can power hydrogen fuel cells? Obviously, I could go on, but these are the answers that Greta deserves.
Thank you, Martin. Would you like to comment?
No, I just feel inspired about it because, again, I mean, when we have talked about how to get to the fact that, I mean, 2040, everything must be fossil-free when it comes to product solutions, all scopes globally. It's a huge undertaking, meaning that 2030 already we need for many of the sectors and segments and geographies being really down this road of implementing and driving it. But I feel there's enormous power about that also when you start to feel that, yeah, there is really an S-curve existing in city distribution or in waste collection or in the ports and quarries. And that is exactly what we're talking about here. We have a number of these ideas. We don't know everything yet up to 2040, but we know that we'll get there, and that we have a transparent system of really following it on a daily basis. It's not a reviewing. It is about actually holding ourselves accountable to shaping the planet we want to live at. So I really like this, inventing, innovating, and implementing at scale. And this is the phase now, 6 years down the road from COP21, right? Accelerating implementation.
Thank you very much. And thank you for bringing up Greta. I was the first journalist that actually interviewed her on tape. Yes, and the tape was, I was invited to the United Nations headquarters in New York to show the interview. And it's amazing to look back and see how her rhetorics and just the power of this young woman, how it is just snowballed and the effects it has. Yes. And before I turn to Jamie, because I think you have a second follow-up question here, I'm just interested, what does she mean for you, Greta, in terms of what you do in your education? How does she inspire you? Go ahead, Victoria.
Oh my goodness. I think, yeah, I mean, Greta is just such a force to be reckoned with, and is such a young age too. It's really interesting to watch her being older than she is, watching her kind of go through this process and really advocate for all of us. I think there's a boldness about her that maybe I wouldn't necessarily have in the same way. And it's just wonderful to kind of see her as this advocate for all young people, who she just is unequivocally herself and really being that bold advocate for the rest of us. And it's something I think we can all really appreciate and be inspired by as students.
Thank you very much, Victoria. Jamie, did you have a second question for Paul and Martin?
I didn't have it on the script, but one of the questions that kind of came to mind as you mentioned, Greta, is how do we get civil society excited about what's coming out from innovators in green chemistry, such that they're also going to be pushing these solutions to their policymakers and decision makers of subnational and national governments?
Great, thank you.
Would you like to say? Okay. Of all of the technological successes in green chemistry, of all of the business successes in green chemistry, there is one thing that green chemistry has not yet succeeded at, and that is the power of story. So right now, if you wander even around this conference, not enough people know the power and the potential of green chemistry. They don't know what it can do, and so they don't know to demand it. So capturing the power of story and doing it in a very positive way. I'm not the first one to say You know, Dr. Martin Luther King did not say, I have a nightmare. We have to have a vision of what's possible, a vision that we want to aspire to. You know, we talk about, oh, is that too utopian? No, it's newtopia. Newtopia is something that is desirable, realistic, and worth striving toward. And so I think that that's what we need to do, is capture the power of story.
To tell the story of the post-fossil modernity, because we will have a different society, but better one.
Yes, I mean, and to let, you know, to let people know that the greatest production, we talk about production and consumption, the greatest production engine on the planet is, of course, nature. And what does nature produce by fossil fuels? Just about nothing. Just about nothing. So if you wonder if it can be done, look out the window, get inspired, and turn to nature as that mentor.
Thank you. Would you like to add, Martin?
No, I mean, of course, agree on what you said, Paul, but I think it's also very important to continue. I mean, there will be certain value chains where we rather quickly will come to, I mean, cost or price parity, which is important in itself, not at least for the social inclusion, that I think is one thing that we really need to continue to consider. There are other sectors where it will be more difficult to abate, but then we need also to continue to put the price on carbon or whatever that is making harm to society and to nature and the planet, right? And also consider how will that exchange system look like? Not at least so we will have everyone on board, because if we are driving a transformation that is not inclusive, then we are getting another type of problem, right? So I think this is about, I mean, finding this. But the good news is that most of the value chain I'm looking into, we get there. We get it more attractive, desirable, cost efficient, and also sustainable. So it's a truly good story in most of them. But there are a few, and there we need to consider how do we drive that as well, because we need to have a price on it. And it's a little bit like, I mean, the vegetarian food when it came to Sweden, you know, a couple of years ago. It was boring, right? Specifically on the restaurants.
Oh, yeah.
So you had one dish to choose from, and it was not exciting. Today when you go, because it's a consumer demand, it's fantastic menus. Even myself, that was never thought to be I love it, through my daughters and everything. So it shows also that attractiveness, innovation, inventing, implementing in different shapes and forms will do the work, right?
Thank you. Paul and Anastas, would you like to ask your students some questions? I think you might have some lined up.
Well, I would just say that 30 years ago, the Volvo Prize and its early winners, and for the past 30 years, those people inspired me. When you look at what is inspiring to you, not necessarily who is inspiring to you, but what is inspiring to you? What behaviors, what opportunities, what optimistic vision, what is it that inspires you and drives you to do the work that you're doing?
Who would like to answer first? Sure. You go ahead, Ines, and then Jamie.
Okay. Yeah, for me, what inspires me the most is authenticity. So when you be yourself, because like we all are shaped by our environment, our background, our thoughts, our community. So yeah, what inspires me is authenticity. Usually like in your background, there's like something that really makes you. So for me is that. And like for me, I'm come from Indonesia. There's like a lot of nature, fast rainforests, oceans, and that also inspires me. That's why like I'm working for the environment now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ines. That's beautiful. Victoria. Oh, sorry, it was Jamie first. Go ahead.
I think what inspires me at COP and also back with my colleagues back at the Yale School of the Environment is truly the community. I came in on day one of COP and I just was washed over with the sheer force of collective action being demanded and also thought of at this place. And I think bringing that back home to YSE, it's really just energizes a lot of us young people who are thinking about these issues at the university level as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamie. Victoria?
Yes, I've been thinking about this a lot during my time at Yale especially, and I feel like the mentors in my life that I've had have just really shaped kind of how I view environmental issues. I think back to my AP environmental science classes in high school and professors that I had in university working on social entrepreneurship and all of these topics, and how that's really shaped the perspective that I have today, and kind of the interesting mix of things that I'm looking at school, and how they really come to a nexus here at the Yale School of the Environment. And the opportunity to do that and learn from those mentors has just been really incredible.
Thank you, Victoria.
I think for me, what inspires me the most is courage. The courage of everyone fighting against systems of oppression, working to reverse environmental injustice. I think it's such an important issue that should be intertwined into everything that we do. And so everyone who's taking action and is courageous is inspiring to me.
If I could just add,
Yes, please.
you inspire me. The students at the Yale School of Environment inspire me. The students of Yale inspire me.
I'd second that for sure, and I'm sure everybody here present at the Swedish Pavilion are also nodding here, and the viewers watching this. And who knows, we might be looking at a future Volvo Prize winner here in this group. That's not at all impossible. So, to conclude, wonderful session. In my program here as a moderator, this was listed as one of my favorite assignments. It's always wonderful to see the power of the next generation, because we are really counting on you. We have not been up to snuff, to be honest, in my generation. We really need look to you. We need you. We also need to step up ourselves, of course, but it's very promising to listen to your brilliant questions, and also, of course, to listen to Paul Anastas, and to just follow your work is truly inspiring. And of course, what Volvo Group does in this field, based on science, is what we need to see from all companies in the world. So best of luck, and enjoy the COP, and we'll see you on somewhere on a stage in the future. Thank you very much, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much. That's really
Thank you.
Thank you so much for moderating.
My daughter, I feel one of the studies, environmental science.